SportsMatters TV, bringing the sports home. Okay, guys, welcome to SportsMatters TV. I'm in Cork. I know that Rory's up the Ulster direction. Tricky times, Rory. COVID-19 has pretty much halted the whole sporting world. But how have you been keeping? Is everything good?
Yeah, everything's good. I think sometimes we're living in a bit of a bubble. We have the kids being homeschooled. I moved out of Belfast a good few years ago because I wanted to be closer to the family farm. I wanted to be out, especially when we had kids. I wanted them to have a little bit of a back garden to play in. And so from that side of things, it's been a bit surreal. It's given me time to actually spend with the kids, which I feel our Ben is, my eldest is 10 next week. And I kind of feel over that 10 years, I haven't been around that much. Yeah. And then also to get back on the family farm, which is where I love being as well. So from that side of things, it's given me a great opportunity to do the things that get put on the back burner when real life kicks in. The other side of it is you do like to keep tuning into the news just to keep abreast of what's going on, because you kind of, when you're sort of trying to keep away from people and isolate a little bit, and it's just phone calls and web chats like this, you kind of do lose a bit of a sense of reality. So it's important to keep a track of what is an incredibly serious virus that is still amongst us.
Definitely. And people always forget, because, you know, you're such an iconic figure in rugby. You obviously have that farming background. Obviously something you enjoy doing.
I do, and I actually used to do it a lot more when I was playing. Certainly before Ben came along, our days off was nearly always a Wednesday with Ulster because we played so many Friday games, and I would have went out. My wife Jodie was teaching, so she went in the morning and didn't come back till sort of afternoon, and the day was my own. And if the sun wasn't shining and I couldn't play some golf, I was out on the farm, and just it was a lovely break from everything for me. And obviously when the kids came along, Jodie was on a bit of a career break for a bit to try to manage those, to allow me to focus on the rugby, and it was pretty difficult to be away quite a bit and then to turn around and go, listen, I'm going out to the farm for a couple of hours, because as anyone that lives or grows up or knows farmers understand that a couple of hours in farming terminology is basically the full day.
Yeah. And like we have to speak, Rory, obviously about like an iconic career as you know, in the world of rugby. How did it all start for you first day? Obviously, you had an older brother to guide you, I suppose, in a sense, obviously. But how did it all start for you first day when it comes to rugby?
I think the big thing for me was the two older brothers, my dad, my uncle, my grandfather. They all played. They played at Banbridge. So effectively, it was down to Banbridge Rugby Club on a Saturday morning from somewhere around 4, 5, 6 years of age, down in the minis, and it really grew from there. We then used to have a big family match on a Sunday afternoon. It was kind of have Sunday lunch, go out, play the match, and come back in again for rugby special, as it used to be. That was on Sunday afternoon, and that was kind of our weekends. Our weekends revolved around rugby, and yeah, look, I just found it was a sport. I used to love soccer, but I wasn't the quickest or the most agile on my feet when I was younger. Obviously, that changed as I got older, kind of. But I found that rugby was a sport that suited me, and yeah, it's just something that always kind of sat well with me, and so we started. Then my dad brought rugby into the primary school, a little small village primary school called Points Pass. We ended up linking up with the St. Joseph's School across the road, and Dad brought that in and coached, and that was my first experience of playing in Ravenhill, going there as a primary 7 last year of primary school, and playing there was an incredible feat. And you kind of, I think at that stage you don't ever think you're going to get another chance to play at Ravenhill, and yeah, I remember a lot of that, considering it's many years ago now.
And they're the good days. Obviously that's where it all started, and like, you know, you rose quite quickly. Like, obviously, you know, an iconic career with Ulster, iconic time with the Irish team. Tell us about that debut with Ireland, first of all, when you came on against the All Blacks. You know, I always remember my granddad saying, this lad Rory Best is going to be, you know, a huge star.
Well, that's very, very good now, because I suppose you kind of, like, that debut was just something that you dreamed of. Like, I had gone down as a kid, you know, that was sort of our family, you know, the Six Nations. It almost felt like, I don't know if they had autumn internationals then, they mightn't have back when I was was a young lad, but it was always, I remember, it would have been 5 Nations then, going down. We loaded into the car. It took us a lot longer than it does now to get down the road. And like watching Ireland games is just such a vivid early memory for me, and such a love of rugby. And then to actually pull on that green jersey, I think in the steps along the way, it seems so far away at the start, and then as you step through and you play underage and you get into the professional setup. And the great thing about being in Ireland is that you if you can get starting for your province, you have a very good chance. It's potentially 2 or 4 of you will represent Ireland, and that's assuming there's no foreigners in there. And to finally pull on that green jersey was something that I was extremely proud of, and to do it alongside my brother was, look, it is the sort of stuff. And I think the most disappointing, one of the disappointing things about that day was we got hammered, but that didn't really matter to me because it was about getting your debut. And probably one of the things you look back on now is it didn't quite realise the magnitude of it, the magnitude of playing alongside Simon. And for that was 2005, 2007, nearly exactly 2 years later, he had to retire. And then you realised how fragile it was, and how it wasn't just there's your big brother, you just play alongside him. So it was a great day. I do look back now and kind of see the physique that I was in and sort of think, jeepers, how did I ever... it was still an early enough era of professional rugby when I made my debut. I think 10 years old at that stage. Professional rugby was, so we weren't really brought through the way the school kids are now. We definitely didn't leave school the finished product the way some of them do now in terms of physique. But it was unbelievable to run out in the old Lansdowne Road and in front of those stands and changing that old changing room, and all those memories that I have from that day.
Surreal. And like, we're speaking of, like, I suppose, around that era, obviously going further into it, like, we've seen some of the most iconic displays, when it comes to Irish rugby. Like, you played with some greats. Obviously, you played with Ronan O'Gara. We've seen, iconic stars throughout that campaign and all the way up until your retirement. But, what was it like to obviously, captain Ireland to winning a Grand Slam? Obviously, that's a huge thing. Probably, one of the best things, in your career, no doubt.
Yeah, it was. I think to firstly captain Ireland and to ask, I think to captain Ireland is an incredible experience, but then to actually ask, so I'd done it a few times when either Paulie or Brian or even Jamie at a time weren't available, and then that's class. And then all of a sudden to be asked to be the captain, like you're the guy that if you're fit and if you're in form and playing, you're the captain. It's not if he's injured or he's injured. That was incredibly special for me. It was I think you feel a lot of pressure at the start because your first instinct is to go, this is brilliant, this is like a dream come true. And then when the euphoria of that wears off over a day or two, and you kind of start to think and you almost plan a little bit in your head, and you realise that you're coming after Paul O'Connell, probably one of the greatest captains I've ever played under. Brian O'Driscoll, the same. Both Lions captains, both world renowned players. You kind of start to go right, and then you look at the squad, and we were pretty depleted after the World Cup, and it's sort of going, is this all it's cracked up to be? I'm not sure. But you always have to keep bringing yourself back to the opportunity that very, very few people get, and that is to captain Ireland. And like ultimately, to captain in a World Cup, was something that I wanted to do. But I think the greatest achievement in my captaincy was that Grand Slam. It was just, I think the most pleasing thing about that, and look, a little bit is from a captaincy point of view, but is the fact that we saved our best performance for last. So the last game, Grand Slams at stake, the pressure's on, because if you lose that, we would have still won a championship, but it would have been a real deflation. For us, in that pressure cooker, to produce the best performance that possibly we had, I wouldn't say ever in an Irish jersey, but well up there as one of the best performances ever, and to do it at Twickenham and all of that, all that came with it was incredibly pleasing. And to be able to be a part of a squad and to manage senior players and the link with the coaches to be able to achieve that in the hottest of cauldrons was really pleasing.
So really, like, obviously 2016 was that big year. Obviously, you know, becoming captain. Obviously, you know, you had your 100 cap. How did it come about? How did the boss approach you and say, look, I want you to be captain? Was it over the phone, or was it in person, or?
It was over the phone. So sort of January, we'd had a Christmas camp, and we'd done a little bit of. We didn't do a lot of training. We did a lot of sort of team planning and building, because there was still quite a few people, like the like of Pete O'Mahony was coming back from his long-term injury, and so those guys were all there. So we didn't train. Joe gave us a bit of time down, because World Cup years are really long years, and he just sort of said, look, we're going to do a bit of, I suppose, almost setting, you know, where are we now? Where do we want to be? These sorts of things. And as part of that, he said, look, this is our kind of our mantra. And the long story short was, we want you to vote for the people that most embody these things. And that was, thought nothing of it. Then sort of around the 20th of January, I get a phone call, and it was Joe. He basically said, look, I apologise, I wasn't able to get up to you. I wanted to do this in person, but because it was important, probably more important that I had the other conversations first with the sort of the guys. I think they were later named vice captains, and Johnny and Jamie, and he goes, this is the nicer conversation, that we want you to be captain. And he goes, well, assuming that you say yes, of course, in which case it's not a nice conversation. And with Joe being Joe, and you know, the respect you hold for him, you don't want to turn into a school kid again and get too overly excited. But so inside, you're all over the place with excitement, energy, and you just sort of go, he goes, yeah, well, what do you think, Bestie? And I went, yeah, Joe, I think I'd love to do that. Thanks for asking. And that was kind of how the conversation went. And then he said, look, we don't want to make a big deal about it, because people are just looking to, there's a lot of speculation. So all we'll do, if you're happy with it, is when we name the squad at the end of January for the Six Nations, we'll just put a C beside your name. And I think he sort of said about, we put a vice captain beside the other two, and he said, and that's it, we'll not make, obviously people want to speak to you about it, but that's all we'll do in terms of, and that suited me, because I'm not necessarily somebody that needs to kick up a massive fuss about it.
It's the best way to be. And like, Rory, we have to speak of, obviously, times now. Obviously, there's a lot of change, and obviously, you know, Johnny Sexton's going to be the new captain. Obviously, Andy Farrell's in. Do you reckon the lads can do a good job taking the Irish team forward?
Yeah, I think they will. I think when you look at the Six Nations, it was a wee bit up and down. The biggest shame was not getting to finish it. I think they looked nervy against Scotland, and of course they're going to be. You know, it's a new coach in. The last time Ireland had played was a heavy defeat at the World Cup, and all the expectations that it went with that. But the Wales game was, I thought it was as good a performance as, certainly that second half was as good a performance as Ireland have produced in a long time. It was up there with some of the really strong performances. And look, England, people just got a bit carried away with the Wales game from our point of view, and the fact that England had lost to France and just beaten Scotland in a horrific storm, and England were primed. And at the end of the day, they probably should have won the World Cup. I think they were the best team at it. South Africa on the day showed that all that matters is on the day, and they produced an incredible performance. But I think England were much more of a reflection of where they were. But the encouraging thing for me from that game was the way Ireland finished. You know, that could have turned into the summer before the World Cup, where it just became try after try after try, whereas Ireland actually got themselves back. And, you know, potentially if the game had went on for another 5 or 10 minutes, you actually wouldn't have known. Like, it is ridiculous to think that Ireland could potentially have won that, but it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility at that stage. And they just, a home game against Italy, and then I think France were there for the taking. And I think it would have been a very different picture of Irish rugby if we could have a strong 5 points against Italy and then won in Paris. I think people will be talking differently now, and I think that's where Ireland are. I think they're going to need a little bit of time to breathe, to grow a little bit and change. It's hard for Andy. Normally when a coach comes in, their first competitions are friendlies in the autumn internationals, and at least one of those are a tier 2 nation where you can experiment a bit. And Andy came straight into Six Nations, which, as much as I heard pundits in public saying, hey, the young guys, it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. It's the Six Nations, and he knew that. And I think now going forward, if we can get a bank of rugby in this sort of late October, November, and get the summer tour, the rest of the Six Nations played, and the November, if Andy Farrell can get these guys together for sort of 6, 8, 10 weeks, I think they'll come out of it and they'll start 2021 a really, really strong team again, because there's too many good players in there for not to be.
We're loving that. And Rory, we just have 2 quick fan questions. Obviously, Peter wants to know, obviously there's been some great players in the Irish team over the years. He wants to know, what was Paul O'Connell like? Obviously, he was a big presence in the changing room, outside the changing room, but what was Paul like in the flesh?
He's just somebody that, and you don't meet that many of them, that when you walk into a room and he's there, or he walks into a room, they're just a presence. And it's something that he always had since the first day I walked in, and he'll always carry with him. Like, I even see it now with a Willie John McBride. When he walks into a room, and a lot of the players from his era, they walk in, you kind of go, they're not as big as I thought they were. Whereas like someone like Willie John walks in and everyone goes, oh, there's Willie John. Well, Paul has the same thing. When he walks in, people stand to attention nearly, and he uses that when you train alongside him, because you don't want to let him down, because you know that he will go to whatever it takes to perform, to be the best that he can be.
SportsMatters TV, bringing the sports home.
Great crack. He's reasonably intense, and he's so competitive with everything you do, but he loves having the crack as well. So yeah, like he genuinely is one of the greats about.
Definitely. And Aaron wants to know, obviously, life after rugby, you must not know what to do, because obviously you're playing rugby, all your life. How are you finding retirement, and what's the plans for the future? Are we going to see you back in the game in some capacity?
I think that sort of coronavirus sort of threw everyone up in the air. I was just sort of getting my head around retiring and trying to get structure and stability back, which rugby gave me for 15 and a half years. And just when you felt you were getting that, you're then sort of all the events that I was doing, some were cancelled. There was no more for the foreseeable future, and you're having to deal with that. It was nice to reconnect. I had given myself to the end of the season to sort of go, right, do a bit of punditry work, do a little bit of coaching down at Banbridge, maybe a bit of mentorship with some of the young players of Ulster or Ireland, or anyone needed that, and then be working towards something. And that probably hasn't changed. The sort of that time frame is extended now, because I feel like I haven't given myself a break to see whether I can be the person that maybe just stays and does like leadership talks, the media stuff, or whether I need to get into a proper job and go, you know what, look, rugby was great, but that part of my life is over. And do I want to coach? Do I want to be involved in the professional setup and something other than coaching? So all of those are still a little bit unknown because of this break, because there's no sport on, so you don't know whether you're missing it, or well, you know you're missing sport, but you don't know whether you're actually missing being a part of it or just missing watching it. And that's why I think they're talking about playing through September and then potentially finishing the season around October-ish with the European Cup, if everything goes according to plan. And that's whenever I'll make a definite move one way or the other, probably. But yeah, look, at the minute I'm enjoying spending a bit of time with the family, and whenever the season starts up again, I'll certainly be looking to do something. I'm trying to do bits on the farm, but I don't see myself farming either. There's opportunities, and hopefully there'll be more opportunities when companies and sport itself restarts.
Rory, there's no doubt you're going to have a bright future as always. There's always big things to come. I hope personally that we see you back in management. Obviously, it'd be nice to see you manage the Irish team in a couple of years. But thank you very much for your time as always. You're an absolute gent, and we wish you a safe couple of weeks ahead.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Rory.